Let's get real for a minute. If your relationships keep blowing up, if the same drama keeps following you from one person to the next, there's one common denominator: you. I don't say that to shame you. I say it because until you own your role in the pattern, you'll keep running the same play over and over again, expecting a different result. Most people don't ruin their relationships because they don't care. They ruin them because they're operating on autopilot, old fears, insecurities, and habits steering the ship. They test, they withdraw, they lash out, or they play games. Then they're shocked when things crumble. If you keep sabotaging connection, it's not about bad luck in love. It's about unhealed patterns that you're dragging every relationship. And here's the kicker: what you don't repair, you will repeat. Fear of vulnerability is one of the most common ways people sabotage their relationships, and it often operates beneath the surface so that you don't even realize you're doing it. Vulnerability means letting yourself be seen as you really are: messy, imperfect, uncertain, needing reassurance at times. It's exposing the parts of yourself that you normally keep guarded because you're terrified of what might happen if someone else sees them. You might think if you let your guard down, you'll be rejected, judged, or even abandoned. The irony is that by avoiding vulnerability, you often create the exact outcome you fear most: distance, disconnection, and eventual rejection. That's why accountability begins with facing this truth. You can't create intimacy while keeping your armor on. Fear of vulnerability usually doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's shaped by your past experiences. Maybe you grew up in a family where emotions weren't safe, where crying was seen as weakness, or where opening up meant you got criticized or ignored. Maybe you were betrayed in a past relationship, and you told yourself never again would you give someone the power to hurt you like that. Or maybe you've built your entire identity around being strong and self-sufficient, so asking for comfort feels like admitting failure. In all these cases, the pattern becomes the same. You decide it's safer to protect yourself than to risk exposure. That decision feels logical in the short term, but it always costs you connection in the long run. What does this fear look like in real life? It shows up in subtle, everyday choices. You crack a joke instead of admitting you're hurt. You change the subject instead of talking about what's bothering you. You pull back when your partner reaches out because closeness makes you nervous. Or you test your partner with little games instead of being upfront about what you want. You might even pick fights when things get too calm because chaos feels safer than intimacy. These behaviors might seem small, but they add up. They send the message that you don't trust the other person enough to let them in. And over time, your partner feels pushed away. Here's the hard truth: fear of vulnerability is rooted in the belief that you're not enough as you are. Deep down, you think if someone really knew you, the doubts, the insecurities, the flaws, they wouldn't stay, so you hide. But what you don't realize is that true love isn't built on perfection. It's built on honesty. Your walls don't protect you from pain. They prevent you from experiencing intimacy. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the courage to show up without guarantees, to risk being seen without knowing how the other person will respond. That's not weakness, that's strength. So how do you start changing this? First, you have to own it. Stop pretending you're just undependent or not emotional. Admit that you're afraid of letting people in, and that fear is costing you. Second, practice small moments of honesty. You don't need to dump your entire life story on someone, but you can start by saying things like, "That hurt my feelings," or "I missed you today." Each time you do, you're rewiring your brain to see that vulnerability doesn't equal catastrophe. Third, learn to tolerate discomfort. Vulnerability will always feel risky. It's supposed to. You can't wait until it feels safe to practice it, because it never will. You have to step into the risk and remind yourself that intimacy is worth it. Another step is to reframe what you think being vulnerable means. It doesn't mean you have no boundaries, and it doesn't mean you share everything with everyone. It means you're willing to be authentic with the people who've earned your trust. It means you stop playing roles and start showing up as yourself. That authenticity is magnetic. It deepens relationships because the other person finally feels like they're connecting with the real you instead of the performance. Accountability also matters here. You need to be able to tell yourself, "I'm the one holding back, and if I want a different result, I have to make a different choice." Stop blaming your partner for not reading your mind or for not breaking through your walls. That's not their job. Your job is to lower the walls yourself, brick by brick, and give the relationship a chance to grow. The truth is, relationships are always a gamble. You can do everything right and still get hurt. But if you let fear of vulnerability dictate your choices, you guarantee that hurt because you'll never let yourself experience the closeness you crave. Courage in relationships doesn't come from never being hurt. It comes from knowing you can handle it if you are. Vulnerability is the price of admission for intimacy. If you're not willing to pay it, then you're not really in the relationship. You're just occupying space in it. If you want love that lasts, stop running from vulnerability and start practicing it. Each time you choose honesty over hiding, connection over control, you take one step closer to the kind of relationship that isn't just surface, level but truly fulfilling. Fear might whisper that it's safer to stay guarded, but your future self will thank you for opening up, because at the end of the day, the risk of being vulnerable is nothing compared to the pain of a lifetime of disconnection. Control issues are one of the biggest hidden reasons people sabotage their relationships, and they often come disguised as standards, boundaries, or just the way I am. At the core, the drive for control is about fear. You're afraid of getting hurt, afraid of being blindsided, afraid of being powerless, so you try to manage every outcome, every conversation, and sometimes even every emotion your partner has. On the surface, it might look like you're just being careful, but underneath it's about not trusting that things will work out if you're not pulling the strings. The problem is, love doesn't thrive under micromanagement. When you grip too tightly, you squeeze the life out of the very thing you're trying to protect. Control shows up in 100 subtle ways. Maybe you demand constant reassurance because you don't trust their love unless they prove it daily. Maybe you get jealous when they spend time with friends, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because it feels like a threat to your importance. Maybe you dictate how arguments should go, or you keep score to make sure you always win. Sometimes control is less obvious, withholding affection until they behave the way you want, testing them to see if they'll pass your secret expectations, or disguising criticism as advice. All of these strategies share the same root. If you can manage your partner's behavior, you believe you can avoid pain. Here's the blunt reality: control never eliminates pain. It just delays it and replaces intimacy with resentment. When you try to control another person, what you're really saying is, I don't trust you and I don't trust myself to handle the uncertainty of loving you. That lack of trust poisons connection. Your partner begins to feel suffocated, like they can't breathe or be themselves without stepping on one of your landmines. Over time, instead of drawing them closer, your need for control pushes them away. And ironically, that's the very abandonment you were trying to prevent in the first place. The urge to control almost always ties back to past wounds. Maybe you had a parent who let you down, so you learned early on that safety comes from taking matters into your own hands. Maybe you've been cheated on or betrayed, and now you tell yourself you'll never be that vulnerable again. Maybe your self-worth is shaky, and the idea of letting someone else have power in the relationship terrifies you. The mind builds this false logic. If I can anticipate, manage, and oversee everything, I can prevent heartbreak. But life doesn't work that way. Relationships are not machines to be engineered. They're living dynamics that need freedom, trust, and respect to grow. So how do you break free from this sabotage pattern? The first step is brutal honesty with yourself. You have to stop pretending that your control behaviors are just preferences or standards. Call them what they are: fear-driven habits. Then you have to practice letting go of the illusion of control. You don't actually have power over another adult's choices, thoughts, or feelings. The only real control you have is over your own behavior, your own words, and your own responses. That's where your energy belongs. Next, you need to replace control with clarity. Instead of trying to manipulate outcomes, communicate openly about your needs. For example, instead of interrogating your partner when they go out, you might say, when I don't hear from you, I start to get anxious. Could we agree to check in once? That's not control. It's a request. It leaves room for your partner to choose, which is what makes it authentic. When you force compliance, you might get temporary obedience, but you'll never get genuine closeness. Another important shift is learning to tolerate uncertainty. This is the hardest part because uncertainty feels like danger when you've been hurt before. But the truth is, uncertainty is built into every relationship. You can never know with absolute certainty if your partner will stay forever, if they'll always understand you, or if they'll never hurt you. That's the price of love. It comes with risk. The paradox is that when you stop fighting against uncertainty and start accepting it, your anxiety decreases and your need for control softens. You also need to remember that people can't be both controlled and loved at the same time. If someone is constantly adjusting themselves to avoid triggering your reactions, then you're not in a relationship with their true self. You're in a relationship with a version of them that's trying to survive your control. That's not intimacy, that's performance. And you deserve better than a performance. You deserve a real connection where both people show up authentically. Accountability is the final piece. You must own the fact that your attempts to control are not protecting your relationship, they're sabotaging it. That means when you catch yourself doing it, you don't justify it. You stop, you admit it, and you course correct. You tell yourself, right now I'm trying to manage their behavior because I'm scared. But fear is not in the driver's seat anymore. Each time you do this, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen a healthier one. At the end of the day, relationships are about trust and freedom. If you can't allow your partner to make their own choices, then what you have isn't love, it's captivity. And nobody thrives in captivity, not even you. Because here's the truth: the more you try to control, the more you live in fear. The less you try to control, the more you live in trust. And trust is where intimacy actually grows. Negative self-beliefs are like termites in a relationship. They quietly eat away at the foundation until everything collapses. These beliefs are the stories you tell yourself about your worth, your value, and whether or not you deserve love. They don't just stay in your head, they leak into your behavior, shaping how you show up with your partner. If deep down you believe, I'm not good enough, people always leave me, or I don't deserve to be loved, then every interaction in your relationship gets filtered through that lens. The result is self-sabotage. You act in ways that almost guarantee the outcome you fear most. Think about if you secretly believe you're not lovable, then when your partner shows you affection, you might question it. Instead of receiving it, you look for the catch. When they compliment you, you brush it off or argue against it. When they reassure you, you doubt their sincerity. Over time, this wears on your partner because it feels like nothing they do is ever enough. What you're really doing is projecting your self-doubt onto them, forcing them to carry the weight of proving your worthiness over and over again. No relationship can sustain that forever. Negative self-beliefs often begin in childhood. Maybe you had parents who were critical, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable, and you learned to internalize the message that you weren't worth showing up for. Maybe you were bullied, cheated on, or abandoned, and those experiences etched into your identity a false story. There must be something wrong with me. As adults, we think we've outgrown those old wounds, but in truth, they sit just below the surface, waiting to be triggered in our closest relationships. And when they are, instead of responding with openness, we default to old protective patterns, jealousy, defensiveness, withdrawal, or hostility. The dangerous thing about negative self-beliefs, that they become self-fulfilling. If you believe you're unlovable, you might cling too tightly, smothering your partner, or you might test them, pushing them away to see if they'll chase you. If you believe people always leave, you might sabotage the relationship early, ending things before they have a chance to reject you. If you believe you're not enough, you might settle for partners who treat you poorly because deep down you think that's all you deserve. In each case, the belief creates behaviors that lead to the very outcome you were afraid of. Here's the accountability moment. Your partner cannot fix your self-beliefs for you. They can love you, support you, and reassure you, but if you're determined to believe you're not worthy, no amount of external validation will stick. That work has to come from the inside. It's not fair to make someone else carry the burden of proving your worth day after day. It's exhausting for them and destructive for the relationship. So how do you break free? The first step is awareness. You need to identify the exact story you're carrying. Ask yourself, when I feel triggered, what's the voice in my head saying? It might be, they don't really love me, or I'm going to mess this up, or it don't matter. Write it down. When you see it in black and white, you can separate it from reality. The second step is to challenge it. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it actually true? What evidence do I have that contradicts it? For example, if you believe you're unworthy of love, yet you have friends, family, or even your current partner showing up for you, that's evidence against the belief. The third step is replacing it. This doesn't mean repeating empty affirmations you don't believe. It means crafting new, more accurate statements and practicing them until they feel natural. For example, may not be perfect, but I am worthy of respect and love. Or, my past doesn't define my value today. Each time you notice the old belief creeping in, you deliberately swap it with the new one. It feels clunky at first, but with repetition, you retrain your brain. Another practical step is to communicate openly with your partner about your triggers without making them responsible for fixing them. For instance, instead of accusing them of not caring when they're quiet, you can say, when you go silent, my mind tells me I don't matter. I know that's my issue, but I want to share it so I can work on it. This both takes accountability and gives your partner insight without blaming them. That transparency itself creates intimacy because you're letting them into your inner world instead of acting out your fears sideways. It's also critical to take responsibility for how these beliefs show up in conflict. Negative self-beliefs often turn arguments into battles about identity rather than the actual issue. For example, your partner forgets to text, and instead of seeing it as forgetfulness, you see it as proof you're not important. That escalates into an argument that has little to do with the missed text and everything to do with your old wound. Catching yourself in these moments is key. You need to pause and ask, am I reacting to this moment, or am I reacting to my old story? That simple pause can stop sabotage in its tracks. At the end of the day, overcoming negative self-beliefs is about reclaiming your power. You can't control your past, and you can't control how others treat you, but you can control the story you choose to believe about yourself. When you shift from I'm unworthy to I am enough, everything in your relationship changes. You stop demanding constant reassurance. You stop settling for mistreatment. You stop pushing people away to protect yourself. Instead, you show up with confidence, openness, and the ability to actually receive love. The truth is, love doesn't fail because people are broken. It fails because people believe they're broken and act accordingly. When you finally reject that lie and own your worth, you stop sabotaging your relationships and start building them on a foundation that can actually last. Poor conflict skills are one of the most destructive forces in a relationship, and yet most people don't realize how much damage they're causing until it's too late. Conflict itself isn't the problem. Every relationship has disagreements. The real problem is how you handle them. If your go-to strategy in conflict is to win, shut down, explode, or deflect, you're not solving problems, you're sabotaging connection. The truth is, conflict can either be a tool that brings you closer or a weapon that drives you apart, and the difference comes down to skill. Most people were never taught how to fight in a healthy way. They saw their parents scream at each other, avoid tough conversations, or use manipulation to get their way, and they carried those patterns into adulthood. Maybe you learned to go silent when things got tense because you thought it was safer not to rock the boat. Or maybe you learned to escalate, raise your voice, slam doors, or throw out insults because that's how you felt heard. Either way, what got modeled for you became your template, and without intervention, that's what you're playing out now in your own relationships. The core problem with poor conflict skills is that they shift the goal. Instead of working toward understanding and resolution, the focus becomes protecting your ego, proving your point, or punishing your partner. For example, if you go into an argument thinking, I need to win, then by default, your partner has to lose. And if your partner feels like they've lost, the relationship loses too. When conflict becomes a competition, intimacy takes a back seat to pride. There are a few common sabotage behaviors that show up when people lack conflict skills. One is defensiveness. Instead of listening, you immediately fire back with explanations, excuses, or counterattacks. Another is stonewalling. You shut down, go silent, or leave the room, leaving your partner feeling abandoned and unheard. A third is criticism, where instead of addressing the issue, you attack your partner's character with phrases like, you always, or you never. Then there's contempt, the most dangerous one, where sarcasm, eye-rolling, or mockery creep in. Contempt doesn't just damage the relationship, it corrodes respect, which is the glue holding the whole thing together. The truth is, these habits aren't about resolving the problem at hand. They're about protecting yourself. If you criticize, you don't have to admit your own fault. If you shut down, you don't have to risk vulnerability. If you escalate, you control the energy of the argument and force your partner to react. Each of these may give you short-term relief, but long-term they poison the trust and safety in the relationship. So how do you develop better conflict skills? It starts with changing your mindset. The purpose of conflict is not to win, it's to understand. If you walk into every disagreement with the belief that your partner is the enemy, you've already lost. Instead, reframe the goal. The problem is the enemy, not my partner. When you shift your perspective this way, you stop trying to destroy each other and start working as a team against the issue. The next step is learning to slow down. Most conflicts escalate because people react before they process. You feel triggered, you lash out, and within seconds you're in a battle over something that could have been a calm discussion. Creating a pause, taking a breath, asking for a short break or counting to 10 can mean the difference between a productive conversation and a blowout fight. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about buying yourself time to respond instead of react. Another skill is listening with the intent to understand, not just waiting for your turn to talk. This means putting down your defenses long enough to truly hear what your partner is saying, even if you don't like it. A powerful phrase to practice is, what I hear you saying is, and then reflect back what they just said. This doesn't mean you agree, it means you value them enough to try to understand. That one move alone can de-escalate 80% of conflicts because people fight hardest when they feel unheard. You also need to replace blame with ownership. Instead of saying, you never listen to me, shift it to, I feel unheard when I'm talking and you're on your phone. This focuses on your experience instead of attacking their character. It keeps the conversation about the issue, not about tearing each other down. It's accountability without aggression, and it opens the door to solutions. Of course, all of this requires emotional regulation. If you can't manage your own anger, fear, or frustration, you'll never manage conflict well. That means taking responsibility for calming yourself down instead of expecting your partner to tiptoe around your emotions. It might mean taking a walk, journaling, or practicing breathing exercises before re-engaging. Emotional control isn't about bottling things up. It's about creating enough stability inside yourself to show up as a partner instead of an opponent. The bottom line is this conflict is inevitable, but damage is optional. Every disagreement is a choice point. You can either escalate the battle and sabotage the relationship, or you can use the moment to practice patience, empathy, and problem solving. Healthy conflict doesn't avoid tough issues. It tackles them head on with respect. And the couples who last aren't the ones who never fight. They're the ones who learn to fight well. If you want intimacy, you have to build the skill of conflict. You have to stop letting your pride and fear run the show. Because at the end of the day, it's not the size of the disagreement that determines the future of your relationship. It's the way you handle it. Poor conflict skills guarantee sabotage, but strong ones build trust, safety, and connection that only deepen over time. The choice is yours. Every time you open your mouth in an argument, do you want to be right Or do you want to be close? You rarely get both.